So let me set the stage for today's discussion. Obviously, I think everybody agrees that data mesh needs a catalog that acts as a window into your data product ecosystem. I mean, after all, if you cannot find your data product, how will consumers find it? And more importantly, how will value be derived from it if no one knows it exists? But to put it in a different light, I suppose, maybe a more positive one, if your data product is easily found, then more people will know about it and they'll be able to derive value from it. So that's the key hypothesis here, is that the catalog is a necessary and foundational element of the data mesh. The challenge that we're going to probably go through is really, how does it, where's a data practitioner actually supposed to go? How do they go about implementing this catalog capability? Well, one option obviously is to introduce traditional data catalogs. Traditional, by the way, does not mean there's anything negative with it. But it does imply that it serves a current need. But data mesh is relatively new. And with an exciting set of new principles, we think that may actually give us some new opportunities to think a little differently about it. So we're going to focus on a few things. What does a data catalog do within data mesh? Will traditional catalogs do the job? And what new opportunities are there to take advantage of data mesh core principles to build something different? And along the way, our hope is that you, as a data mesh practitioner, gain some insights that'll help you better implement your organization's data mesh. Now, today, I'm honored to have two guests, Ole and Jean-Georges. And if I could just ask each of you to briefly introduce yourself. Ole, first yourself.
Okay, thank you, Eric. My name is Ole Olesen-Bagneux. I am the chief evangelist in Senea, a data catalog that I dare call not traditional, in the sense that we try to spearhead a technology setup that mirrors mesh principles uh, without delivering a mesh, of course. I am also the author of the Enterprise Data Catalog, published by Relay 10 months ago now, so still relatively hot off the press. And I met you, Eric, during the writing of my book, where you presented your ideas that I found very interesting. And I was lucky enough to have the time, and you had some time, so that we could incorporate some of your ideas in my book. I describe data catalogs in a tech agnostic way. In my book, I want to say I discuss all kinds of data catalogs in my book. Enough about me, Jean-Georges.
Hey, thank you, thank you, Ole. Thank you, Eric. Ole, don't be too nice to Eric because it's going to bite you. Okay. Uh, I've been involved in the data mesh committee for a little time now. I hope the audio is okay. I'm outside on a rooftop in Barcelona. I just did that for Eric, was probably my minus 55 at that time. You can see in the background the Sagrada Familia. It's not a virtual background. I can actually move it so you see that it's actually a real one. And I'm really excited to be with you. It's kind of the first webcast of the year, and there will be a lot with Eric, because Eric and I are working on a fantastic book published by O'Reilly, which is called Implementing Data Mesh. And just for a little promo, I just published this little guy last week, which is Data Contracts for All Ages. And we might or might not talk a little bit about data contracts today. Back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Jean-Georges. I'm absolutely confident we will use your data contract wisdom in our discussion today. Now, in terms of myself, my name is Eric Broda. I run a small data mesh and generative AI consulting firm. I've implemented data mesh at large financial services firms, payments firms, and I'm working with an international nonprofit to implement a global geospatial data mesh to make climate data easier to find, consume, share, and trust. And as Jean-Georges mentioned, co-author of a wonderful book, O'Reilly's Implementing Data Mesh. Now, just real quickly before we start, on an administrative note, each of the panel members are talking on their own behalf and not necessarily for their employers or clients. So with that being said, I also encourage the audience to submit questions to the chat, and we will try to address them at an opportune moment in the discussion. So let's get started. Ole, as the author of the Enterprise Data Catalog book, which I've read, by the way, and is absolutely fantastic. I strongly recommend it for all you folks. But you get the first question. What is an enterprise data catalog? Simple one.
Thank you. Yeah, I was actually pushed by one of my reviewers, an excellent reviewer, Vinu Ganesh, to try to do a high-level diagram of a data catalog, and that proved quite difficult. But I managed, so I was told. So high level, a data catalog works like a search engine for the data in your company, and it does so by providing a metadata overview of the data sitting inside the entire IT landscape of your company. Contrary to a search engine on the web, a data catalog in a company does not provide direct access to the data sources, at least if you have a traditional setup. So what you get when you get search hits is a list of hits, and once you click them, you get into a deeper description of those assets, but they will still be located somewhere else. So that's the logic, and the logic behind that is due to, well, technology, confidentiality, and so forth. So it's a metadata search engine for all the data in your company. Can be built in many different ways, and it can be used for a lot of stuff. So basically, that's it. I can definitely go into detail. I wrote a book about it, but I don't know if we should.
No, I actually I think it's a fantastic definition, because the thing that you mentioned, which I think is unique from your book and your perspective, is you take a view of what the user actually uses the capability for, which is to search to find data, which is one of the things that I found so unique and refreshing in your book, by the way. So I think that's kind of the thing that I would hang my hat on it. But Jean-Georges, you have years of wisdom and experience. Tell me what you think a enterprise data catalog is, and then we'll start to get to the tough questions.
I'm only going to agree with Ole. I don't have anything to add. I just think it's really about exposing the metadata, okay? And I think that we have a tendency, especially when we're talking about data contracts, to have the metadata and the metadata. And for me, another important thing is that the data contract is also the source of truth for metadata, okay? So because the data contract is a source of metadata, then when you capture it and expose it to the catalog, that's where you get quality metadata as well.
Okay, perfect. So let me ask, we'll start with Ole, but JGP, feel free to interject. We've talked about metadata in the catalog. Give me an example of what is in an enterprise data catalog, or in an enterprise data catalog that might be exposed from a data product.
Was that for me? Apologies.
We'll start with you, Ole, and then Jean-Georges will pass it over to him.
So the types of assets sitting in a data catalog? Well, basically, a data catalog, most data catalogs come with a standard set of connectors to data sources, meaning that you can expose data from various types of data warehouses, data lakes directly, well, databases, whatever you want to expose at a metadata layer for certain purposes. But the overall idea, of course, is to create this searchable, navigable, and discoverable overview of those data assets. It could be tables, it could be files, of course, stuff like that.
Okay. Now, Jean-Georges, I'll pass it over to you. Obviously, answer that question, but I think you have a perspective relative to data contracts. What's the relationship between the two, and where does it fit within the data catalog?
So for me, I'm going to try to illustrate what I'm thinking. This is my data catalog. Okay, I promise you, Ole, we're going to play Legos tonight. Okay, so this is my data catalog, and when I open my data catalog, I find my assets in it. And if I look at the type of assets I have, you can see that I have security elements, a notification. I have observability elements. And I have the different data contracts themselves that are part of that. And of course, you have one element which is really important, which is security. Okay, so this is what I'm thinking about the data catalog.
Perfect, perfect. So now that we have the basic foundation laid, I'm going to ask a little bit of a tougher question. So, start with Ole. You've been in the data catalog space for a long, long time. You've written the book on it. What works well, and perhaps more importantly, what doesn't work well? What are the challenges with an enterprise data catalog?
Um, uh, Jean-Georges, I come prepared. This is what an enterprise data catalog looks like if it's of a certain age. You can see that in this corner we have all the bones and all the skeletons from the people that died trying to implement it. Old school data catalogs were introduced at a point in time where the technological realities of companies were very different than today. And they rely on static meta models. Basically, a vision of the world that has been defined by the vendor of the technology. So it's the vendor saying to the customer, "This is how your world looks like." More modern technologies are based on knowledge graph. More modern data catalogs are based on knowledge graph technologies, such as Sinea. I also talk about knowledge graph-based data catalogs quite substantially in my book. And what they provide you is a possibility of defining your universe of knowledge yourself, which is a beautiful thing to do when you work with such big amounts of data. Because it's all about making that data searchable and findable. And you need a technology that can rank your assets with great power. That is a knowledge graph. Now, we may get back to that. So I think I will wait a little bit about Sinea's vision, but briefly, we're trying to push that a little further by federating a knowledge graph. But I think we should get back to that. I think to set the stage a little more for the audience, I think it's fair to say that a lot of data catalogs are unfortunately not being implemented with great efficiency. We see a lot of failed data catalog projects and a lot of technologies being quite expensive and not very effective, not a lot of return of investment on these technologies. That was also what motivated me to write the book, quite frankly. It wasn't to salute a technology that I thought existed well. It's more because I come from a background in library information science, where I taught, I wrote, I read a lot of sources on how to organize knowledge and data and information and how to make it searchable again. And I thought that angle was completely missing, both in the technological foundation of many products and also in the way they were implemented, unfortunately.
Perfect. Perfect. So Jean-Georges, I'm going to now transition this from a general enterprise data catalog discussion to a data mesh catalog discussion. So first off, let's do the real simple thing. What is a data mesh catalog as distinct from an enterprise data catalog, and how does it line up to Ole's description?
Well, so for me, let's start with what is a data mesh. Okay, so a data mesh is an assembly of data products. Okay, you combine them, and when you associate them, you get your data mesh. And the once more, I may sound a little bit obsessed by the thing, but you've got on your mesh, you've got the different data catalogs that are going as a not catalog, sorry, but the data contracts that are flowing through. You can see that they're flowing like that, like they're flowing from one to another. Okay, but instead of flowing to one data product to another, those data contracts can actually go back to the data catalog and bring all the assets there. So that's why you can extend very easily and create very easily a very lightweight data catalog that is linked to your data mesh and to your data products.
Perfect. So that actually, I'm going to hold that thought because I think we're going to come to that a little bit later. So here's a question. I'll start with JGP and then I'll ask Ole to comment on it. Data mesh principles are pretty clear. There's been a wonderful, spectacular book written by Zhamak Dehghani that describe it. I'm not going to go into detail, but you got domain ownership, data as a product, self-serve capability, federated governance. What can be done to traditional data catalogs to take advantage, I suppose, take advantage of those principles and recognize those principles? Start with JGP.
It's a little bit of a tricky question because when you're thinking about the data mesh, you've got new assets, okay, which are not recognized by the traditional data catalogs. For example, a data product, okay, you don't have a notion of data product in some data catalogs. Same thing for data contract, okay, and I'm not obsessed about data contract. I just dream about them. So all these assets needs to be surfaced in the data catalog. So I'm thinking about an IGC or a Colibra or whatever, but or other, okay, Acryl, whatever. The thing is, your data catalog needs to be able to support these new assets and these new forms of assets, so to expose them, and that's a challenge I'm finding right now with data catalog. Once more, I'm not the expert, Ole is, but are they extensible? Are we going to surface some of these new elements or these new assets via custom properties? I don't know. Okay, that's still very hot it's a kind of a hot potato right now, and I'm throwing it to Ole there.
There. Well, let me just preface this, Ole. You only hinted at the announcement from Xena just recently, but I would very much like to have you talk about it because it is specific to data mesh, and I'd like you to explain a little bit about why Xena targeted data mesh, what made the product specific and unique to data mesh. And the thing that really intrigued me and I thought was very, very cool and unique was the application of knowledge graphs to aid that search capability. So this is, we rarely go down a vendor advertisement route, but I think this is so particularly applicable. I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about Xena and why you chose that specifically and how it addresses some of the challenges for data catalogs and apply them to data mesh.
Thank you, Eric. A couple of disclaimers before I say this. I was trained as an academic to be as fair and as just as I can. So I have to say that the roadmap defined by Cinea is due to a genius that I have come to know, Guillaume Baudet, that is the Chief Product and Technology Officer. It's my responsibility to communicate it and interpret it so that we can explain it in the best way possible. But I did not invent this cool idea. So that's the first disclaimer. And the second disclaimer is that our product can be used in all kinds of data architectures, also non-data mesh implementations. We work completely fine in that setup as well. But that said, to your question, our roadmap that was just revealed is a roadmap where we reflected very much like you did in your excellent paper, also, Eric, just recently. Of course, with different perspectives, but we sat down and said, okay, what is in fact the best way for a data catalog technology like ourselves to enable a data mesh? And what we found was quite surprising was, and even I dare say a paradox, is that many of the technologies by which you expose a data mesh, and I guess this crowd is very familiar with data mesh, so I don't need to repeat all the principles, but the main idea of a data mesh is to create a decentralized data architecture, infrastructure, organization that can work with data at scale in an organization. Now, why on earth do you want to mirror that at the metadata layer in a monolith? Why do you want to do that? To me, that is a paradox, and it's a paradox that is one of the root causes of why data catalog implementations fail. It's because they can't scale. Just as data architectures can't scale, metadata architectures can't scale. And the way we addressed this was to have not a knowledge graph, but what we call a federated knowledge graph, which means that we can have multiple knowledge graphs that opposes each other, each representing a domain in a unique way, and coming together in a graph of graphs that we call the enterprise data marketplace. So we think that we are the first movers in terms of not delivering a data mesh. For God's sake, we do not deliver a data mesh. We do not try to push that. But we think we deliver a technology that quite efficiently allows you to mirror your data mesh, applying the same principles at the metadata layer that we use in the data layer, applying data mesh principles and thinking. So honestly, we're quite proud of that idea.
Well, perfect. So you mentioned my article, so I'm not going to, folks can feel free to read it. I have a number of articles on medium.com, but in respect to today's discussion, I make the case, and I welcome, by the way, your feedback on both of these, but this will be a little bit of a long-winded question. My apologies, but you've just now made the case that traditional data catalogs, at least in their current incarnation, may not be a good fit for data mesh. There's a duplication of data, metadata, complex synchronization process, overhead, lack of incentives to keep a centralized entity up to date. And I think that the framework that I look at this is effectively the intelligence to consume and understand the metadata is in this centralized data catalog. But here's where I think the epiphany I had anyway, and this will be leading to the discussion, is data products have innate intelligence. When I say that, a data product has a boundary. It has a set of access mechanisms, including a discovery and an observe, and maybe even a /contracts endpoint that exposes information about the data product. In other words, it has intelligence. So is there a way that I can actually leverage the intelligence of the data product to keep the information, the metadata about the data product there, use the access mechanisms to get at it, and to Ole's point, make the search capability very, very different. So if I had 2-sentence description of every data product, and I use things like a vector database or some interesting capability to search those 2 sentences about every data product, and effectively identify, if you put a query in about, in my case, climate data precipitation, you would find the precipitation data products and you'd click on one of them and it would delegate all access to the data product. So it would discover information and metadata through the discovery endpoint. It would be able to observe the data product based on the observe endpoint. It would be able to view the data catalog, the data contract through the /data contracts endpoint. In other words, the role of the catalog is radically different. It doesn't house metadata. It houses the absolute minimum to facilitate the search experience that Ole's mentioned. And then it delegates everything else. In other words, the model is very much like the internet's DNS. It's a proven architecture. All the intelligence, if you will, is in the websites, and the DNS just lets you find the pathways to it. So the question I have is, I put that out as a provocative article to get some feedback and reaction. But let's have that dialogue right now. So, Ole, we'll start with you. You've read my article. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me the good parts about it, what you may agree with, and maybe to start the dialogue, what gaps in the thinking is there?
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm from Scandinavia. We debate relatively calm most of the time. Most of us. I have a hard time getting getting upset about your ideas, Eric. I think it's very clear thinking, and I'm not saying it to scratch your back. I think it's quite nice to see some new thoughts and ideas circulating in the space. There's a lot of legacy and a lot of marketing around technologies that are not fit for purpose. So that's very, very nice. What I like about it is the nature of like the plasticity of that structure, how easy it is to scale, and how logically it works. I think some of the blind spots in your article would be to perhaps frame existing technologies, also older technologies, as focused so much on data governance and compliance. I don't think they agree, and I tend to not agree either in that description. I think many catalogs for decades in setups that were fruitful to their way of working have delivered a lot of analytical potential, exposing contents of warehouses, lakes, and whatnot. Then on the more detailed, and I don't know how much into the weeds you want to go here, but a little into the weeds is that the nature of metadata is to at some point both be with the product and not be with the product. That is simply a matter of fact for metadata. If we take a book, for example, in the opening, I'm not going to take out a book. We all know that in the opening pages of a book, there will be metadata. There will also be similar kind of metadata on Amazon describing the book, meaning that that data will be in two places at once. And this is where it gets a little into the weeds, because I think that what you're proposing is a beautiful way of getting the vision of data mesh into a more pragmatic reality that can be made actionable. And for that, I really want to compliment you. What I think is the reality in most companies is that you need to have an acceptance of the fact that an IT landscape and data sources lives in unfortunately in this kind of world, right, where it's a structure that's a maze, there's a lot of legacy, and in order to make that work, you may need something that does not look into a perfected data layer, but a data layer that is a little more baroque or burlesque, or whatever you want to call that. Now, to finalize that point, to give Jean-Georges some time also to answer, what we think in Cinea is that I wanna go the same direction as you, Eric. I wanna push left. I wanna leave metadata with the sources, and we are working very hard on very specific ways to do that in Cinea. Very, very simple ways, in fact. So I think we will be moving in the same direction, but given we are metadata technology, we will always try to be a pragmatic solution to whatever IT landscape is in an organization. So I think that's where we differ, but it's because we differ in the purpose we deliver. I think your article is great. I can't really say anything else, Eric. I'm sorry.
Well, Ole, first off, thank you very much for the very positive feedback coming from the enterprise data catalog expert. I feel very humbled and thankful for that. But so Jean-Georges, you have some experience building these data meshes at large financial institutions. What type of catalog did you use, and how heavyweight was it, and what would you have changed to make it different?
So the company where I was in uses several data catalog solution, and we decided to build our own because because for exactly the same purpose as you were saying, it's something we wanted something lightweight. Okay. Um, and we wanted also at some ideally to be able to expose some of the metadata and some of the metadata of the data contract. So when, for example, um, I want to find all the data regarding transactions, but I want the data that are refreshed at least every 5 minutes. And I want that my SLAs and my data quality rules are that. Okay, so the search is not, of course, everybody dreams and wants a Google type search where you've got a one bar thing and you just type in and you get the results. But you can also have some kind of advanced search where you want to be able to filter on advanced features that are part of the SLAs, okay, or part of the data quality rules as well, okay. So you want to be able. Sometimes you care, sometimes you don't care, okay. And then, but the data catalog should be able to expose that. So whether you keep in each data product, okay, its own version of all this metadata, and you work like a DNS, and then your data catalog is only a cache of this DNS, that works with me. But for efficiency purpose, you need to have all this data, and you cannot, when you've got 2,000 data products, you're not going to ask the 2,000 different data products, hey, what's up? Okay. So that would be the only thing I would argue there. And I will admit that I have not read your article yet. I know we've discussed about it, but I have not read the article yet.
No, I appreciate that. Let me kind of take one of the audience questions here because I think it's particularly relevant. We'll start with Jean-Georges because you did mention it. By the way, the thinking on the article is going to go into our book. And Ole, the fact that I have that blind spot around governance, I think is very, I'm very thankful that you pointed that out. And that will be remedied for the book. So Jean-Georges, start with you and then over to Ole. The concept of a catalog versus a marketplace. And this is a question from Jens. How would you differentiate data catalogs and a data marketplace? So, Jean-Georges, you've told me that the registry needs to be needs a marketplace to go with it. Tell me what a marketplace is relative to a data catalog.
I think there was so much confusion. You know, it's we've been, you and I, on quite some people on the call as well. We've been around for a while there, okay, and we've seen that the same thing has been renamed over time, and I think that it's maybe a good time for a refresh over a data catalog and just say, okay, well, data catalogs are just, you know, like a bit like the I think I was kind of joking with Ole on LinkedIn, where for me the data catalog is the Macy's 1908 catalog, where you turn pages, where you eventually have an index, which is really painful to find. But the 2024 version of a data catalog is a data marketplace, where you've got this advanced feature for searching, where you can interact with user, where it's kind of almost a hub where the people are, you know, it's your entry point to your data, right? It's not, it's where you're going to find that. It's where you address the problem of discoverability of your data in the enterprise. So that's what I'm saying. It's just like a, you know, it's like when we went to C to C++, right? Same fundamentals, just a little rebranding.
Okay, Ole, I'm going to set that question up for you also. You specifically mentioned the notion of a marketplace in your discussion around what Zinnia has produced. When I look at a marketplace, I look at the emphasis is around the consumer and the consumption experience, specifically the search experience. When I look at a catalog, I think of more of a book of reference for metadata, which is different. There's overlap clearly, but one is geared towards customer and consumption and search, and the other one is for reference. Did I capture that correctly? Is that your perspective, or correct me if I'm wrong?
I I don't correct people, Eric, but I can share my perspective. I think I th- when I wrote my book, The Enterprise Data Catalog, I struggled with the fact that I had to use this category because we lacked another term for it. Um, I think an enterprise data marketplace is a correct description of the direction in which we are going. Um, that said, an enterprise data marketplace will be supported by data catalog technologies. And then I think we need to watch out because a data marketplace has some characteristics that normal marketplaces do not have. Normally, we see these papers, a lot of AI-generated pictures on social media explaining data products as if we were buying milk in a supermarket or another product in a supermarket. But there are some very um, different. There is a very different reality around a data product. A data product cannot be the exact same product repeated 100 times. It does not make any sense to have 100 identical data products sitting next to each other in any kind of technology. So data product needs to be unique in a sense, and then they can be used eternally, again and again and again, contrary to a product in a supermarket that can only be used once. And likewise with the shopping experience of the data marketplace, in order to cater for the semantics, for the desire to have a data marketplace, certain technologies are working with a shopping-like experience with a basket. But we're not baking cakes here. We're not making meals for our family. It's not what we're doing. So I think the idea of a data marketplace is correct. I think the term is correct, albeit I have a difficult time adjusting with all kinds of semantic changes, but I think it's correct. But I think we need to think quite carefully about what it actually represents. And so we are building something that we think will work in terms of data management and data mesh, and not something that simply mimics a supermarket shopping experience, because that's not what data is about.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
if I may
Go ahead,
add to that,
JG.
yeah, I fully agree with Ole. Okay, so it's not about unique products or tangible products, of course, but I think that we need to come back to the problem we're trying to solve, okay, which is discoverability of data within the enterprise. And when you're thinking about that's where you want to have a lot of you know, I don't have I don't have the vision yet of what could be a data catalog, and maybe your company has it, Ole, and I'm in Paris next week. So, but the thing is, it might be a layered version of something, where you've got the Lambda users are just interested in the a flight field, okay, or flight number field, and then you've got someone that want to actually look at the cost or the CO2 that the flight is taking, et cetera, et cetera. And this layer, it's about creating the user experience we want for searching data, okay, and that's where it's kind of getting exciting, okay. And as your work as well, Eric, on Gen AI can also extrapolate, generate, summarize, classify all these data products. That's a field where I'm really excited, and where I think that this is where we're not at a catalog where we turn pages, but really at a marketplace, or just a market. You just walk, you see all this nice produce, and you just pick them. Okay, I think the analogy is getting there. We're getting there.
Okay. Well, let me elaborate a bit on, and I'll give you a good example. It's one I'm actually working on right now, and it's open source. It's open, so I can actually talk publicly about it. I'm working with this nonprofit involved in the climate space. They're trying to address climate change by surfacing data so that people can make the appropriate informed decisions, understand risks, etc. Here's the dilemma that we have is if you think about the world's climate data, it's like 10,000 times more complex than what an individual enterprise has. So where an enterprise may have hundreds, maybe thousands of data sources, there's literally hundreds of thousands of climate data sources. There's some big ones, NASA, NOAA, the European Agency. And then there's some very small ones. Individual utilities actually publish emissions data. Thousands of different data sources, thousands of different formats. Admittedly, there are some standardization a little bit, but not a lot. So here's the question. If I had to design a data catalog or a registry or a marketplace for a world where I actually could not get at the specific metadata easily, I may not be able to convince NASA, which is a 200,000 person organization, to work with little old me. As powerful as climate change is, they may not want to actually keep up to date the metadata in our open public repository. So there may not be an incentive to do that. And the complexity of trying to manage thousands of different data sources in different formats becomes extremely difficult. But the mandate I have is to make climate data easy to find, easy to consume, easy to share, and easy to trust. How would we, and by the way, it's being built on every set of climate data is a data product. We'll have a clear boundary and a clear owner, maybe a curated owner. And there will be common access mechanisms that we may wrap around some of these things. But if I had to build a catalog or the marketplace for climate data, Ole, give us some advice. How would you approach that challenge?
Well, first of all, it's a very important mission that I full-heartedly support. I think so. So I'm a little unclear if you're talking about actual technologies that you would want to, or because I think you can answer that in many ways, right? What kind of technologies would you want to use? How would you stitch them together? And also, what would be the information architecture, like the semantic universe of what you're trying to represent here? Given the massiveness of this amount of data, and the diversity of it, I think both those tasks are quite difficult. So I don't know which one of them you want me to answer actually.
Well, let me give you a little bit more of a guidance here. So every one of these data sources has an immense amount of metadata. Um, let alone just the structures and the formats, which are there's a myriad of them. There's different service levels. Some of it's collected, hourly, minute by the minute. Some of it's annually. Every one of those is different. So now I'll give you a leading question. The reason we went with this registry marketplace idea is because we could not easily capture all of the metadata, and because the owner did not subscribe to our approach, not yet anyway, we couldn't be confident that we could actually keep it up to date. So the approach we said is we can scrape a website and get a 2-sentence description and put that into the marketplace or the registry enough that they could search, find me precipitation for North America, whatever, enough that they could search and then get a list and then click on it and then go through a discover capability to actually surface the actual information, a sample, maybe a geospatial viewer and stuff. So we ended up coming up with something that's very, very, very federated out of necessity. And then the epiphany I had in writing the article is the same challenges we have in that completely federated climate space mirror some of the challenges we have in a federated enterprise model. So in that context, where
okay, now I get it.
How would you approach that problem?
Well, I think what if I understand the technological realities around this correctly, then all of the data that you're working with is open. It's not hidden in any sense.
Correct.
It's accessible. And in that respect, I think there is a difference between, I have to say, between an enterprise setting and the setting you're describing, in the sense that pushing left, leaving metadata with the sources, and only pushing a minimum of metadata to some kind of centralized registry that can search across these sources is just the way to go. And I don't think I would have done anything differently in that sense. In the context of an enterprise setting where the levels of confidentiality force people to leave things behind access policies, makes it necessary to push, in many cases, makes it necessary to push more metadata into a centralized solution. But that can also be done scraping the source and leaving a lot of metadata in the source. And I think that is a very, very good idea. So
Okay.
I do not disagree completely, but I disagree somewhat. I don't think you can compare the two existing realities, technological realities you describe 100%, because the data catalog has this uh, quirky reality where it has to work like something that it can never become. It can never become a search engine, simply because a search engine is based on the fact that you can access data directly in websites, and that is not a possibility
Okay.
in an
John
enterprise
George,
setting.
you're nodding. What's your thoughts? And then I got one more question. We're gonna run out of time relatively soon. What's your thoughts?
I
You
love
have
the
to.
Yeah, I love the idea that you actually invited Ole to give free consulting on your project. Uh,
Thank you, Ole, by the way.
Yeah, it's $500 an hour, no problem.
I like the rate card. Should be more upfront. But no, I think yeah, I think Ole is right, and I was kind of thinking, bouncing back on just your last sentence where you were saying, "Hey, it cannot be a real search engine because you don't have the real data and you don't access the data." Right? The marketplace is what is the marketplace exposing? It's mainly metadata, and that's why we and I'm not going to make any plug for any data contracts or whatever, but the data contract has this possibility to add data, to add sample data. Okay, so in your case, Eric, when you've got, as Ole clearly outlined, you've got public data, okay, or almost public data. You don't have this issue of PII, HIPAA, and what else. But in an enterprise, when you've got this thing, but nothing forbids you to, at the column level of your data contract, to add examples. Okay, so and the examples could be kind of relevant. Okay, so if you've got the proper tooling that builds the data contracts, that is extracting some sample of the data or some range of the data without exposing the secrecy of the data, you make your search engine a lot more interesting.
Perfect. Well, first off, thank you very much for the free consulting advice. I will absolutely keep that in mind. We're probably going to have time for two more questions. I'm going to go to Samia, who had a question, and I'll paraphrase it. But microservices seem to be what Zamak had modeled data products on, and microservices have API portals, API marketplaces that are common out there. How do they relate? Jean Georges, maybe we'll start with you. How do they relate? Any similarities? What are your thoughts?
To be honest, I start to be a little bit fed up of everybody trying to compare data products and data contracts to API. I think we are in a position in history in the time, and I fully agree. I've read everything that Samia wrote. I fully agree with Samia, but specifically on the constant comparison of API versus data contracts or data products, I think and if I remember correctly in Jamak's book, she describes that every data product, okay, all of my little data products, they have APIs, but it doesn't mean that they become APIs. Okay. So that's something that is a little bit annoying me now, that trying to compare that. And we are also in a position right now where we're trying to do this with a pretty loose definition of modern data engineering, or modern data stack, or whatever we want to call it. And I think it's really about taking the 20 years of experience in Agile we have and put them into data. Okay. So some things work, some things work less. Okay. So, and I think API and this, when and this idea of just using API for communicating data, for example, that's complete nonsense. So that at least that's my
No, fair enough. So Ole, just over to you. The notion of microservices as an architectural pattern or approach or an analogy for what we do with data products, close or not close?
Uh, I I I wanna answer that as briefly as I can, but I have to concentrate a little bit, because I think I think we have to agree, and I'm working on this big diagram, and I would love your feedback on it, Eric and Jean-Georges. I think we have to agree that data mesh can be several things. We have at least two competing visions of data mesh. Jean-Marc Degarne's idea of data mesh for analytical data, and then Peter Stringhold's data management at scale, which is both at the same time a more pragmatic solution, but also a more complete, or I shouldn't say complete, but more difficult solution, in the sense that it also encompasses operational data. And so I think we need to agree a little bit about our definition of data mesh. One is not correct and one is not wrong, and the other is not wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But in the sense, when we're discussing data mesh as it was originally laid out from Jean-Marc Degarne's side, she created this idea. I think it's fair to say that there is a big intellectual heritage from microservice architecture that is dedicated for operational data, and then the data mesh idea for analytical data. Now, what I want to do, and what we have been doing in Cinea, is actually something that adds a third dimension to this, saying, okay, so if Jean-Marc Degarne's vision was to do something similar as microservices, but only for analytical data, how can we do that for metadata? And that's what we've been playing around with in Cinea, right? So I think there are, of course, some differences, and those subtleties I don't think we have time to go into. But instead of saying is it one and the same thing, we are at least thinking about how can we push this idea of decentralization, of federation, further in a metadata layer. And Samia, thank you for the question. I would love to talk more.
Perfect. Now we are at time, so I'm just going to ask each of you, Jean-Georges and Ole, for any closing words. And before you do that, though, tell folks here how to reach you if they have further questions. Ole, you first.
I go first. Jean-Georges, I want to play with Legos with you in real life. This was a pleasure. I only have a skull, but don't be offended. And I think this was a wonderful discussion. Let's keep it open, and since there are no answers to everything yet, this is being made as we discuss it. Ideas are evolving. Let's try to remember not to pretend to have all the answers.
And how would people reach out to you if they wish, through LinkedIn?
Oh, yeah. LinkedIn is my preferred social medium. I am also on medium.com, steadily building my profile. But LinkedIn is my preferred profile. Yes.
Okay, Jean-Georges, some quick closing words. First, how do people reach out to you if they have further questions about data contract or Lego?
Yeah. So I can it's LinkedIn as well. However, I would just, if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, just don't connect blindly. Just leave a little word or say, hey, I've heard about you there or something. I get so many people just trying to connect and I just don't know who they are. And I try to, it's not filtering, but I try to have a real relation with people, not just click, 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 etc. Um, so closing word, I love discussing with you, Ole. I've seen there's a lot of questions which are super interesting in the chat, and I was a little maybe we should bring back that to the data mesh learning community and try to answer some of them over there.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Well, I
and
think, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, John George.
no, and as our book with O'Reilly is not published yet, we should start with this one, okay? And as a reminder for this one, half of the profit, more than half of the profit of that are going to charities, okay? So you know.
Perfect. There you go. So for myself, first I want to say thank you to Ole and Jean-Georges for the incredibly insightful discussion. If you wish to reach out to me, the best way is through LinkedIn, Eric Broda. And I am on Medium, medium.com/at Eric Broda, ERICBRODA. There's about 20 or 30 articles out there that I've written, the majority of which on data mesh, including this recent article. Just quickly in closing here, our hope here when we started this discussion was to explain what a data catalog is and then apply it to data mesh. I'm hoping that we actually did that, but I think we did more than that. I think we tried to highlight some of the challenges with existing tools and offer some very practical suggestions on how we may be able to use some of those tools, or at least some of the great things about those quote traditional tools, with maybe a little bit of tweaking, or maybe some new thinking, like from Xena, and apply it to this thing we love and call data mesh. So hopefully out of this, you've learned something and you'll be able to make your enterprise data mesh more searchable and more observable, and maybe even introduce data contracts, right, Jean-Georges? So with that in mind, once again, thank you to the authors. Thank you for the audience for your great questions and participation. And with that, I bid you adieu. Thank you. We're done.
Oh, and then also just an announcement, catch the next installment, Next Generation Data Mesh Governance on March 7th, right?
Perfect.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey guys, see you in the US next time. Bye bye.